This is the Sewing Circle podcast presented by Hanky Code. I'm Rebecca Vanderkoy, here to introduce to you up and coming queer artists and the powerful stories behind their work. Today I have Molly Grace joining me. She is an immensely talented queer pop funk artist. She recently released her single Femme, and in just 2.5 weeks, it was streamed over 500,000 times. Thank you so much, Molly Grace, for joining us today.
Oh, it is such a pleasure to be here as always. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Since we talked last summer, you've been busy. You released a live album from your Lovesick tour, and you recently released a new single, Femme, as we mentioned. You also had a West Coast tour, and you have an East Coast tour coming up as well. So, how have you been able to juggle everything that you're working on?
Oh my gosh. Um, I don't know honestly. I feel like you just kind of make it happen. It's definitely I'm definitely a busy bee, but I really enjoy being busy and when it's like my music, that's stuff I love to do. Um, so I don't know, you just kind of make it happen, but it's definitely been busy.
No, that totally makes sense. So, with Femme, you really leaned into the iconic "but I'm a cheerleader" imagery. Can you talk a little bit about that visual choice?
Oh yes. Well, first of all, But I'm a Cheerleader is just like obviously such an iconic part of like lesbian and queer culture. Like I feel like when you think of like the lesbian movie, I feel like people think of But I'm a Cheerleader. So I love it in that way. I also think like the storyline of the main character Megan, I think is her name, right? Um and I just feel like I see a lot of parallels to her storyline and coming out um, to the song Femme. Also, I thought that Femme had a super like chanty kind of quality to it. And so I was like, oh, I feel like it would work with cheerleader imagery. So yeah, to make a long story short, it's just iconic and fit the song well.
It really does, though. But I'm a Cheerleader is probably not shocking, one of my favorite movies. And so I saw the imagery for the song and then I heard the song and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever.
Yay! Oh my gosh, I'm so glad a fan approves.
No, genuinely. So, what was the writing process like for that song?
Oh, it was wonderful. So I was driving in the car and I just came up with like the acronym for FEM, like the fabulous, enticing, magnetic, magical, everything. But I didn't have like anything else for it. And then I had a writing session with my friend, Kate Costantino, who's an amazing artist and writer. And I like brought her this idea and she was like, oh, hell yeah. And we wrote the song. Um, and I feel like she was the perfect person to write it with because she like also values like playfulness in her lyrics and she's just like she's just wonderful. I love her a lot. And then we recorded it in New York with Cody Fitzgerald and I just had the best time with him too, like working on the arrangement of the song. So all in all, just a wonderful writing process for this song. So I'm very proud to put it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, kind of switching gears a little bit, I'm sure that touring is on your mind, with the East Coast tour fast approaching. And I'm curious, is there a specific show from your West Coast tour or really any of your other performances that especially stands out to you?
Oh my goodness. West Coast Tour was really, really special, especially because I feel like when you go to a new market, is what we call it, like you don't know how people are going to react. And like for the East Coast, I have a lot of friends and family, like in Boston and New York. And so I know when I go there, I'm like, okay, at least my friends and family are going to show up, right? But for the West Coast, I was kind of like, well, I don't really have roots here, so I don't know who's going to come. But I was really blown away by just the energy of the crowds every night. And if I had to pick a standout, hmm, we had a lot of fun in Berkeley, California. That was a lot of fun. I really loved that venue, and the energy of the audience was amazing. And the fans I got to meet were so sweet after the show. But really, the whole West Coast tour run was incredible.
That's amazing, though. So, what are your favorite songs to perform live?
Um, I love Lady Lady. Probably that's my favorite because that's when the band does their solos, which is so special because I just get to watch them do their thing and absolutely pop off. Um, and I also in Lady Lady get to do the whole like bridge talking part where I'm like, let me tell you about like all the boys I dated in high school. So that's always fun. And like I follow like the same general shape, but like every night I feel like I throw in something a little different for the crowd. So that's always a highlight of the show.
That's awesome. So, speaking of touring, what would you say you enjoy most about it?
Mm. I really love touring. There are a lot of things I love about it. I'm definitely an artist who likes to tour. Um, but I think my favorite part just has to be like meeting fans and like seeing fans in person. It's like especially like with a career that like I built largely off social media, it's like I feel like sometimes looking at your phone like you don't like it's just like names on a phone and it's hard sometimes to conceptualize like what that many people would look like in a room or like putting usernames to faces, and it's like so cool when I like see people that I've like maybe DM'd with or they comment on my posts all the time and I get to actually like hug them and like see them in space. It's always just like surreal every time.
That is really cool. So, with touring, you're obviously on the road a lot. Is that a challenging thing for you to be constantly traveling, or do you kind of like that?
Totally. I mean, I think it's both. I really do enjoy traveling and seeing different places. I am a Sagittarius after all. But yeah, I feel like the routine is definitely a hard thing. And it's actually something I'm like working through right now, trying to like figure out how, like, in these periods of times when I'm traveling, like, I can find my like kind of peace. And I also think like my band, I think we travel really well together. And I think we have a good understanding of like, oh, we're gabbing, we're having a good time, but also like we'll have our like nonverbal, like quiet time in the van. I feel like I'm still learning exactly how to make like to find little pockets of routine while I travel to make that easier for me. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard, like just not being in one place for a long time, but it's also things I love to do. So I have confidence that I'll figure it out, but I think it might just take time. Like every time it gets a little better.
I feel like it's something that you kind of got to learn the ropes of almost along with everything else. So,
Totally like tips and tricks.
yeah. So, you recently made a TikTok that you're working on your debut album, which is super exciting. Can you talk a little bit about what that process has been like and maybe what listeners can expect from that album?
That process has been amazing. So over the past year, I've been writing. So a ton in Nashville. I've taken 2 trips to Los Angeles. I've taken a trip to New York and have just like been co-writing all the time with all these amazing writers, which has been new for me because most of my old stuff I just wrote by myself. And I feel like co-writing has really like made me a better writer in a lot of ways, like just like getting better at the craft of songwriting and getting better at like like the first thing you write down on the page. Sometimes you're like, oh yeah, that's it, but like getting better at the ability to say, okay, can I beat that? Can I challenge myself? So I feel like I've just grown a lot as a songwriter in the making of this album. It's also been really nice, like creating an album, like with like the thought in mind that I am making an album. Cause I feel like in the past, like I've written songs and kind of made them fit together for a project. But for now, for this album, it's like, I was writing all like for the creation of one project. So I feel like they're all really meant to go together in that way. Um and also like it's just been really fun, and then like the creative side of it, like once we had all the songs written, like picking which songs were going to make it and like choosing what the like visual identity is going to be for the album and what the name is going to be. And so that has just been really fun and I'm really excited for people to hear it.
That sounds like a very exciting process, honestly.
It's fun. It's like my baby.
It does also really seem like you've found your voice and style as an artist with a lot of like, the really fun, energetic queer pop funk. How were you able to reach the point of like knowing that was the type of music that you wanted to make and that was kind of the corner of the music world you wanted to be in?
Yeah, I feel like because it was kind of a journey, like, to get there. Um, I don't I don't even know. I feel like when I locked in to like what is like the current like Molly Grace vision and like aesthetic and style, you could say, I feel like first it felt really good for me. Like when I was on stage, like it just felt supernatural and like exactly what I was like supposed to be doing. And I also think it started like working. Like with like other people. Like I feel like fans started picking it up. And I do think that's a sign of like, okay, this is like then just like the woo woo part of me is like, oh, like this is when it's meant to be pushed out to an audience is when it's ready. So I feel like that's kind of like how we landed on it. And I'm also like, I'm sure it'll change like as I grow up, but yeah, I feel at home in this current Molly Grace.
It's great. So with this new album, I don't know how much you're able to say about it. But I guess I'll just ask anyway. Do you have any idea or like goal of when you're hoping to have it kind of be out in the world?
Yes, definitely this year is what we're hoping for. Um, and there will be singles, of course. Um, but yeah, I'm actually going to LA in February, hopefully with all the terrible things that have been going on over there. But to record it. So we'll see.
Is it one other question I have, kind of looking back at touring once again? What are you most excited about looking ahead to this East Coast tour? I know you mentioned you have some family and friends on the East Coast, so I'm sure that that's kind of a fun aspect of coming out here.
Oh, for sure. That's like a really special highlight is that like I get to see my family and my friends when I'm on the East Coast. I'm like, "Yeah, I get to see my mom and my dad and my sister." Um, but I think I'm just really excited because we're kind of like stepping up like the production of it all. Um, so in past like headline tours, it's been me, bass guitar, drums, which has been amazing and wonderful. But this time we're adding in tracks. So you're going to be able to hear like background vocals and some of the other instrumental like elements from the songs, which I feel like is just going to make it even more full. Um, and I'm just like really excited for how it's going to look and how the audience is going to receive it. We're also doing a lot of new songs on this tour. Like probably I'd say half the set list is like stuff from the album. So these audiences are going to be the first ones to hear it and we'll kind of test it out with them and see how it goes.
That's really exciting. I also feel like it'll be really nice because you can kind of get a feel for how people are receiving the music. Obviously, it's a much smaller group of people than like all of your listeners, but I do think it'll be nice to kind of get a feel for that at least.
Yeah, and see like cuz there's always a few songs that you're like you don't real think that the audience is gonna love, but then for whatever reason it just crushes live. And I feel like that's such good feedback to have. There's also the opposite. There are songs that you're like, oh my god, this song is gonna be insane live. And it's just like it's good, but it's not like the one that everyone like comes up to you after and says, oh, I love this song. So it's always just really good feedback to get.
What are kind of songs that you hadn't maybe anticipated being as successful or as fun live that have really become really staples for live shows, I guess?
Well, Lady, I feel like I never expected to be as like huge on stage as it is. Like it just has such a great energy live. Also a little bit of hell. Um I like love that song, but it's so funny because I just like you never know how like the audience is gonna grab, but like I never like when I was thinking of like the huge moments in my set, I was like, okay, we have like Lover Lover, Lady Lady, like all like these songs, but then people for like Little Bit of Hell is always like such a high point in the set too. So that was really cool to see.
That is so fun. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited for your East Coast tour and for the new album that you have coming up as well.
Oh my God, I'm so excited and you're the best. Thank you for always supporting me and I can't wait to see you.
I cannot wait. And I'm also so excited to get to see you perform live.